Welcome, everyone. We are so excited that this event has been made possible. It is our 23rd event, our Christmas event, and we're very excited. Anastasia, one of our organizers, is completely looking Christmassy, and I hope all of you all are also feeling the holiday season and enjoying. Before we start with the main event, we have a couple of polls for you. So let's have the first poll. So first question is, because our platform is about PyBerlin, Python and Berlin. So our first question for all our viewers and audience is, for how many years have you been using Python? Is it less than 1 year? Is it 1 to 3 years, 3 to 8 years, or you're a super old user and you have been with Python since Python started and it's more than 8 years? So we'll give you another 20 seconds and then show you the results. All right, so from the people who responded to the poll, most of them are less than 1 year using of Python. Then comes 1 to 3 years. Well, 1 to 3 years is what PyBerlin is. PyBerlin also started in 2019, and we are almost 2 years old right now. So you have been using Python since PyBerlin was around. 3 to 8 years and 8+ years, 28% and 17%. So thank you, these old users of Python. Maybe you can share your experience with us and with our panelists and share what you like and dislike about Python. So our next question, since our platform is about Berlin as well, and we all love Berlin in Germany, our next question is about how long have you been in Germany? It could be never, you're joining in from another city, or it is less than 2 years, 2+ years, and then forever. You're Berlin at heart, living in Berlin, and just Berlin is what we all love, actually. So another 20 seconds, please join the poll, please answer, and we will share the results and then proceed with our event for the night. And let's see the results. Oh, so 50% of our users, of our audience, is joining in from another city. So thank you for tuning in and joining this event. And then comes less than 2 years, 2+ years, and forever. That is, our second most popular audience group is living are from Berlin. Then comes the less than 2 years and 2+ years. So with that, we will start our event. It was very interesting. Thank you everyone for joining in, and it is really, really nice of you. The holiday season and the Christmas week is already on, and we're very grateful that you are joining into our event. Before we start with the panel discussion, a quick introduction about what is PyBerlin, why we exist, and also our history in the last 1 year. So why PyBerlin? It is because we all love Python, and this is the TV tower that you can see. The Python has climbed the TV tower, which is a symbol of Berlin. And since we all love Berlin and Python, so we have this platform of PyBerlin. We love sharing ideas. We're all based in Berlin, and we welcome everyone who is interested. Thanks for joining in. This is our 9th online event. We started, I think, in April was our first event, and since then we have continued to have one each month. The contribution of our speakers and organizers who've put together each and every event is really commendable, and we're very grateful for everyone who has been part of this journey. We don't have many rules, but one thing that is super important to all of us is that we should be nice to each other, polite, patient. Sometimes technical issues can be there. You don't know what can come up. So just be nice and patient. And if you want to know more about our code of conduct, the link is visible on the screen. It is very safe to ask questions. No question is good or bad. Please feel free to ask your questions. For this event, we have the chat open, and also you can ask questions just by popping up and saying, hey, I have a question. There are no well actuallys, no just well ifs. Just feel free to ask your questions. No subtle isms. By that we mean sexism or racism of any form. Please be welcome, be nice, and make this platform as comfortable as you would expect it to be. About our organizers, we have Anastasia, who has been with the platform the longest, then me, Shreya Agrawal, and we have Theo Costia and Ellen Kionish, whom you will be interacting with in the later part of the event. It's been a real pleasure for us to host these events for you, and we look forward to you coming back to our platform in future as well. Before we start the event, we decided that since this is the last event of this year, we would like to have a year in rewind. This year, for sure, for everyone has been one hell of a year. Something has definitely happened that is unique, and we will remember this year for forever. So it was the anniversary event in February when we moving on to the online events. We welcomed some new members, bid farewell to some old, and right now we sit here together celebrating the Christmas event. So what was unique for PyBerlin for 2020? We held our anniversary event at Free Now office in Berlin in February 2020. This was also the last event which we all held in person. We had so many people that we actually had to say no to some of the attendees, and that in itself was like, we were really happy that so many people showed up, and it was really, really interesting. The office was also very nice, and we really enjoyed the food and pizzas that were served as well. But after that, well, Corona happened and we had to move to online events. But it was really interesting how our organizers and our audience accepted this online form of meetups very well. And we had good, interesting sessions that we organized online. We welcomed some new members. I myself joined the team in April, and then we welcomed Ellen and Theo around August. And it was really nice to organize events for the Python community in Berlin throughout this year. At the same time, we also bid farewell to some of our old organizers who moved on to different and new chapters in their lives, Mateo and Miguel. They were with us since we started off way back in 2019. Some of them left us in, I think, around April or May, but we are very grateful to both of you who helped us organize the events, and it was a real pleasure to work alongside you. And we hope that you all come back as organizers and attend our events. And also the beautiful presentations that you see and the clip arts that you see, these were created by some wonderful people and resources. So the free assets and resources, the presentation template was by Slides Carnival, and the photographs by Unsplash. And people who helped with logo and story and make this platform so easily accessible was Elena, Konstantin, and Christian Barra. So thanks and a huge shout out to all of you for helping us making these events possible and making it so interesting. So today's agenda. This is not a regular event. Generally, we have speakers presenting their work, but today we have a panel session in which 4 people will be joining in and sharing their thoughts on a Python-related topic. So today's event, first of all, was sponsored by Scout B, and Anastasia made it possible for it as well. So thank you to Scout B and Anastasia for helping make this event possible. The panel discussion, for the host for the evening would be Ellen Kionish, and the panelists will be Artur, Gesa, Katharina, and Moises. And for questions, like I already mentioned, please save your questions for an open mic session in the end. You can even pop your questions in the chat section, but it would be really nice if we have the questions at the end. Just unmute yourself and ask the questions. It would be really nice for us to have an interactive session, and in some way we would feel that it is a live event. So the agenda for tonight, we started off at around 7 p.m. where we are introducing what was the story behind and how we're going to organize it. Around 7:20, we will start with the introduction to our panelists, then move on to a panel discussion on what makes a professional Python programmer professional. Very interesting, and I look forward to it. The panel discussion will be for around 45 minutes, and then we will move on to Q&A with the participants at around 8:30. Followed by the closing session. Till this point, everything will be recorded. and we will be posting it on YouTube as well. After that, at around 9, we have thought of a remote beers and casual talk in breakout rooms during a short break. And then from 9:15, we'll start with some games and events that we've planned for you all. The after party or after event will not be recorded and will not be posted anywhere. So along with this, we're also looking for speakers. And by speakers, I do not mean professional speakers only, but also everyone who wants to share something, be it a personal project or something interesting related to Python that they found in their everyday job. If you have something interesting to share with our audience, please feel comfortable to share it with us. The formats are both talk of 30 minutes and lightning talk of 5 to 10 minutes. So whatever is comfortable to you, please feel free and reach out to us and submit your proposals. The link is visible on the screen, but you can also reach out to us on Meetup or on Twitter, whatever makes you feel comfortable. And we also have our next event already planned. It is on January 25th, 2021. And we really look forward to it. We really look forward to 2020 ending and 2021 starting, which will hopefully be better for all of us. So do join in, and it's a Monday, so feel free to join in and see how 2021 is turning out for PyBerlin. And then we're also on Twitter by the handle PyBerlin Python. So we would love to hear from you throughout the event, whether you like it or what you like about it, or if you have any feedback for us. So please feel free to tweet what you think about it and tag us on Twitter. We're also on Slack by, the link is visible on the screen, Python/Berlin slack.herokuapp.com. And this was all. So let's get started with the event, and over to you, Ellen, to introduce our panelists and get the event a great, huge start. So thank you and stay tuned.
Thanks, Shreya. So let's get our panel started. We will do the introductions of the panelists one by one and in alphabetical order. So I would ask Artur to introduce himself briefly.
So hi, my name is Artur. I've been doing stuff with Python for more than 10 years. I started probably around 2007-ish or so, and since about 2010, it's been my sort of main job is the programming with Python. What was I going to say? I'm joining from Poland right now, from the Krakow area where I'm based, and I work, although I work mostly remotely with London-based companies. Or at least that's been true for the past decade. Yeah, I've been to Berlin for the first time last year. It just happened that it was for the PyPizza Berlin, but my first stop on the way to PyPizza Berlin was the very first PyBerlin meetup. And if you were there, you could see me in the coding slam with Christian, where we were talking about the different snippets with standard library. Yeah, that's probably like the short introduction, and yeah, looking forward to talking more about Python in the rest of the evening.
Cool, thanks, Artur. The next panelist would be Gesa. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Gesa. I'm working as a developer, and I've been working as a developer for 3.5 years. And only recently, like more or less during the last 1 year, Python has, so to say, become one of the main languages that I've been working with, because I've joined projects that have to do with data engineering. Before I started working as a developer, like full-time, I studied Chinese studies and even went so far as to do a PhD in classical sinology. But during my master's, actually, as an elective, I did some computational linguistics, and that's when I first got introduced to Python, and I just really it was basically love at first sight, because we built a grammar parser in Python, and that was just really nicely done, and the code was very elegant. It was a nice mixture of object-oriented and functional concepts that we used. So ever since then, Python had a very positive image in my mind. Yeah, and basically, I guess that's more or less enough, I guess, as a first introduction.
Cool, thanks, Gesa. If I count correctly, the next one is Kat.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Kat, or short for Katarina. I am a computer scientist. I have a PhD in computer science, and I'm now working as a data scientist. So I'll try to give a bit of a data scientist perspective on using Python today. I hope there's some people here that are interested in that. I've actually, absurdly enough, already in my studies, roughly around 2002, started using Python, but then a 10-year break. And it has been my main language since basically I started working as a data scientist.
Cool. Thanks, Kat. And then last but not least, how do you pronounce yourself? Moises?
Moisés.
Moisés, thanks.
Yes, yes, my name is Moisés Guimarães. I'm from Brazil. And I relocated to Czech Republic in January 2018. Yes, about 3 years ago. And I came basically, I was a C developer before this, and then I switched when I started to consider myself as a Python developer when I took this new job. I've been to Berlin a couple of times already. Last time was actually during Python Pizza. You might have seen someone in like a green mask or something like this, some music going around. Yes, basically Brazilian, started coding 16 years ago, working, and yes, based in Czech Republic.
Cool, thank you. Let's dive into the panel. And our first question is, what does being professional mean for you in the context of Python programming? Just to kind of warm up and give some context to our answers. And I would like Gesa maybe to start off.
Okay, so being professional, I thought of it because actually I became a software developer with one of the reasons being, or the main reasons being, that I really like the collaborative aspect of software development, that you work together in teams most of the time to build some software, as opposed to what I was doing before, basically scholarly research, where in the humanities at least you mostly do single author publications. So I guess professionalism then, a lot of it, and that's not strictly restricted to Python, it's about how you work together in a team, I would say. So I would say a lot about being professional as a Python developer is about how you interact in a team, and basically how you, of course, write idiomatic and clear Python code, but then also with the idea, I guess, in mind that that's because then other people can work better with your code, understand it more readily, and then that you're also serious about knowledge sharing, basically, about like sharing knowledge one-on-one with your colleagues or in talks and meetups, so that other people learn more about technologies maybe, or Python code that you have more knowledge about than others. And then lastly, I guess also basically if you're working in a team, not pushing your own technical decisions necessarily, but always giving a good argument and listing trade-offs of alternative decisions, all these aspects of teamwork, I would say. But I would say if you take these aspects serious, then you at the same time, it makes you become a better and better as a Python developer, because in order to knowledge share, or in order to write clear code that others can easily maintain and extend, you just will develop a deeper and deeper understanding, I guess, of the language, but also of different technologies at the periphery of the Python ecosystem.
Cool, thanks, Gesa. So I really like those aspects of teamwork and knowledge sharing. I'm wondering what the other panelists have to contribute to that. So maybe Moisés, what is your perspective on this question? I don't think we can hear you.
I forgot to unblock the mic. Yeah. So professional Python developer. I started seeing myself as a professional Python developer when I made the switch of job, because like I was mainly being paid to be a C developer, and Python was my pet language for like my pet projects or any fun stuff that I wanted to do, because it's so comfortable and nice to code in Python. You don't step over too many problems compared to other languages that I've tried at least. And then yes, I was a professional developer before with other languages before I became a professional Python developer. And for me, becoming was basically the change in my job description to be like Python. But yes, like things that make you like professional involves all of the hard skills and soft skills around. It's not just like about the coding, but also like the testing, the documentation, and knowing, having like your tool set and mastering your tool set on so how you can do all of those things.
Cool, thank you. Okay. So yeah, I really like this aspect of you become a professional when you actually get paid to it. It's a very pragmatic definition that I find very appealing. And I really also like those aspects you bring up about testing and documentation and mastering your tool sets. And I wonder what Kat has to add to this.
I'm sorry, my answer won't be much about Python at all. I would like to relate any kind of developing. I mean, we often call it also software engineering or data science, in my case, to other engineering disciplines. And other engineering disciplines have often a strong feeling of what it means to be professional. They probably even have certification of what it means to be a professional in that engineering discipline. And just quoting a bit actually from Wikipedia here, it is a lot about assuming personal responsibility for the development and application of your engineering science and knowledge. And then it doesn't really matter what language you are using. It's that you're taking that personal responsibility and you're taking the pride in what you are building. And for me, for example, that means that you do understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve, and that you're not just there to take a task that somebody has given you, but you try to understand why that task is important, and let that guide you towards making different design choices based on your understanding, your domain knowledge, and the background that you have. And then in the end, it doesn't really matter what language you are using. You are a professional.
Cool, thanks. That was a really high level, or not high level, but like from a very zoomed out perspective, and I really appreciate that. So this notion of being personally responsible, taking pride in your work, and focusing on the problem you have to solve. We really have an interesting variety of answers here, and I'm really curious what Artur's perspective is.
Yeah, so I don't have much to add. I fully agree with everything that's been said so far, especially what Kat said, about the part that once you become a professional, it essentially doesn't matter what tools are you using. Like if you're a professional developer, the professional developer working with Python or with JavaScript will have a lot of the same common, what's the word I'm looking for? Properties, I guess. Like they will care about the test, about documentation, about the understanding the problem that they're trying to solve. And then in that sense, the Python or any other programming language is just the tool that they're using. So there's like another aspect of mastering the tools, but also there's like a meta skill of being a professional developer and knowing what you should be doing, and like knowing what problems are you solving, and yeah, how to go about solving those problems.
Cool. So I think that's I think that's a really useful kind of two-level perspective on that Artur just brought in, which is about, on the one hand, we have the high-level idea of being a professional developer in general, which a lot of you alluded to in various ways. Gesa mentioned this, Moises mentioned that he came from other backgrounds, etc. And Kat definitely brought that in. And the other thing is really the master professional Python in the narrow sense of this is how we use Python professionally. And I think it's really interesting to figure out what this means in different contexts. And my next question is, Moises already went in that direction. Already went in that direction about when did you realize that you're actually a professional, and Was there anything specific that triggered you for the sense of, okay, now I'm a professional Python programmer, whereas before maybe you weren't sure about that or were sure that you were not about that? Anybody would like to share something on this question? Just unmute yourself.
I can expand on what Moises said before, that essentially, like, if you become paid to do something, it's sort of the pragmatic definition of being a professional. Unlike Moises, I was not professional in other languages before, so I basically like started developing with Python and then sort of stick with it. So for me, I guess that moment would be when I transitioned from like doing hobby projects to actually being responsible for maintaining and developing and designing the code base that was in Python. Yeah, but even like starting from there is like still like levels to go. Like you don't become, it's not like a Boolean thing that you become professional as you switch from false to true. You become like more professional every time you practice the software development. So you can always become more and more professional, I guess. So you can start feeling professional at some point, but then you can always do something more to become more professional, I guess. Yeah, that's all from me.
Cool.
And
Gesa, sorry.
Okay.
Might as go.
Yeah, I'll follow up. I was also thinking about this today, and like it also is not something that just adds up. So sometimes like being professional means not just about the code itself, but how you behave around people, around decisions. And sometimes we act up like more professional. Sometimes we act like less professional, depending on the situation. The thing is it's like martial arts. That's why you repeat the basics exercises over and over. So you get used to find that same situation and then know to react like naturally and do the right thing. And the more you have experiences, I think you have more chance to act like with more professionalism at the specific event.
Cool. Is there any specific example that you can think of where you use this approach of kind of repeating kind of like martial arts movements to become more professional?
This is actually, I was talking with some people at Python Brazil about coding dojos to use like solving basic problems and getting more people to interact, and like every 5 minutes you switch the person which is trying to solve the problem, and then you learn from each other. It's like about this repeating these basic exercises every day. This in a way that like if you want to make your like domain over the language like more fluid, and then like explore new solutions to problems. And then in the future, when you see like new problems, you can remember, oh, like that was that last time that I solved that other problem that looked like this one, and we use this approach, and then I can try this here as well.
Cool, that sounds useful. Gesa, you looked like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, just that I fully agree with what's been said so far about the only thing that really I can say that was a switch to professionalism if I really define or if I understand professional as in the very narrow sense of I'm getting paid for it. And apart from that, really everything else, both the mastery of the language and the tooling and of writing tests and documentation in a way that later on I can better work with the code or other people. Yeah, all of this is more or less a progression where I couldn't wake up one morning and say I've made a big leap. And I also feel, because a lot about professionalism is also, for me, about not having a very big ego, and because a lot of my work is done in pairs. Basically, it's two people working on the same piece of the code or the same feature. I feel that it's very important to basically not be very patronizing with the colleague that you're working with, and I feel that that actually gets easier the more my technical ability is also developing, because then I can just take a step back and say, okay, I don't have to prove anything here. I can just basically be collaborating in a very collegial way, and that's also something that I connect with professionalism, and that's also something that progresses and that I guess one gets better over time. Good.
Cool. Yeah, I'm picking some themes up here, which is one, the basic or pragmatic definition of professionalism is when you get paid. And the other thing that a lot of you mentioned, and I'm really curious what Kat will add for this in a second, is this idea of progressing. So you don't switch to being a professional, but you're always progressing and becoming more and more professional. And that also, the more professional you become, the easier it is, as Gesa pointed out, to collaborate, because then you feel more confident in your abilities and more able to relate to others. I find that really fascinating. Kat, what has your experience been with that?
Yeah, actually, very much towards the second point here. This progression, for me, this is somehow very closely linked to digging oneself out of that stupid imposter syndrome of like the feeling, you know, I got this. I have successfully done it several times. I have made mistakes and I have dug myself out of those mistakes, and I know other people do mistakes too, and we all work together, we correct each other's mistakes, and we are confident in the work that we can do. So maybe this is not professionalism per se, but more being able to perceive oneself as actually, yes, I am a professional person because I'm not being held back anymore by that imposter syndrome. I can think about myself in that way.
Cool, that's fascinating. Thanks. And maybe to switch up the direction a little bit, I'm wondering, so professional is sometimes used also a bit of a, or some people associated it with a sense of gatekeeping sometimes. So you're either a professional or you're not a professional. Maybe if you're not considered a professional, you may be taken less serious. Do you feel that there is a notion of gatekeeping around being professional in the Python community, or is that something that you have not experienced? And whoever wants to go first, please just go and unmute yourself.
Okay, I'll follow up on something that Kat mentioned before, because I don't see any gatekeeping in the Python community. And speaking of Python community, it's hard because Python community is not a thing. I mean, like, there's the Python people from Germany, Python people I know from Brazil, Python people I know from many other places, and it's hard to put them all in the same box and say like the Python community. But in the Python industry, I would say I don't see a gatekeeping because we don't have things like people have in Java, like certifications, or at least I don't know of any certifications in Python. That's not a thing, like a label that you get and then now you're professional. So I see more the like being professional, more something like related to just like knowing the language, knowing the tools, and then you have to keep updated with the tools because they change on a monthly basis or year basis, and also about growing responsibility over the code you do and how you maintain it, either for other people or for your future self.
Cool, thanks. So I'm really glad I'm really fascinated to hear that you see no gatekeeping. Did anybody have any different experiences on this topic, or are you all in agreement that gatekeeping is not really a thing? If you're in agreement, you feel free to nod or something.
I guess it's also because especially the Python, all the big Python conferences are, I guess, one of the Python language communities, really one that is, I guess, most vocal about welcoming first-time speakers. And that's why I also would say I haven't seen gatekeeping neither around when it comes to speaking at conferences or contributing to open source projects. Of course, I cannot talk for all open source projects in the world, but the ones I've seen are rather encouraging these things, are encouraging first-time contributions, and it's curated and are encouraging first-time speakers. And that's why I don't see gatekeeping neither, like actually no gatekeeping at all, but especially not around anything that we would define as are you professional or not, or can you become professional or not?
Thanks, Gesa. Kat, you wanted to add something or say something different?
I find it quite hard to answer this question, because I do think that maybe I'm coming from the group of people who is doing the gatekeeping, namely the people who have a formal education in computer science. Especially in data science, we do have a lot of people coming from other sciences or from other academic backgrounds. I kind of have the feeling that I have it easier to prove that I don't have to prove that I can professionally do professional software development, because that is my degree. And it's not my personal experience, but I have heard other people talk about that they have a much harder time getting that kind of recognition, because they do not have that formal background.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's also something that I have anecdotally heard from people, is that, especially in data science, not so much in software engineering, but maybe that's the background, where the background comes in, is that I've met quite a few people that try to get into data science and as part of the Python community, and they felt they were being held back by not having the right degree or not having the right experiences. And so I find it fascinating. So it seems to be, and maybe that's an interesting point to realize, that maybe the software engineering part of the Python community is a lot more encouraging and less concerned about gatekeeping, and maybe in the data science community we are a bit more gatekeepy around degrees and backgrounds, and maybe it's something to keep an eye out.
Yeah, I wanted to just add that maybe it's because like the data sciences community is still focused more around data rather than like Python. The Python is just like a tool to get something done with there, rather than like focusing more on the engineering part of it. So because the in the software engineering part, there's sort of more, I guess, like variety of stuff happening rather than in the data world in some sense. Like all of the data. What I'm trying to say. I think like all of the interesting problems in data require a lot of sort of deeper understanding, like a lot of math background and so on, versus a lot of problems in software engineering do not. So therefore, like it doesn't make sense to, for example, not hire somebody as a software engineer because they don't have a PhD in a related field or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds plausible. And
but I don't. I mean, I think there's. When I am doing software engineering, so I work as a freelancer, as a data scientist and software engineer, and when I'm in more software oriented projects, I do feel that I'm actually building a lot on the formal education that I do have as a computer scientist. That the way I make decisions are very much guided by things that I have learned in my studies. So I don't think it's necessarily true that knowing these things, and I don't necessarily think that is a formal education that brings you that, but just knowledge of these things makes you a stronger software engineer, just as it makes you a stronger data scientist.
Yes, I agree with that completely. Yeah, that just not the formal education part, but the fact that if you know stuff about, let's say graph theory or something, if you're solving a graph-related problem, then it's easier if you don't know that stuff. So yeah, that's completely true. But then, like, I don't know if if a lot of people hiring for those jobs are looking for those qualities, because they could be looking for a quality like, hey, can you write a view in Django or something like that? And then they don't have to even ask about formal education in that sense. Versus if somebody is hiring someone to solve the problem they have with the data, they would like to know that they understand the problem that they have with data better. That makes sense.
But aren't you selling your fellow software engineers a bit short if you call them people who just update Django views?
So no, I don't think so. But the point is that I'm trying to make is that the market and the people who are hiring different people, right? So if somebody is hiring a software developer, they might want to hire just somebody who will write a Django view. So they might not even care what the education they have, versus somebody who is hiring somebody who will like design the machine learning pipeline, they would probably expect that person to have like a stronger math background or something like that. But, you know, I don't know, I'm just making guesses here.
Yeah, we were talking, it's really interesting because we're talking about a really diverse range of what we consider software engineering, which might write anything from updating Django views to maintaining large million user per second kind of use sites based in the infrastructure, and also in data science machine learning. We're talking about anything from what could be considered business intelligence all the way to training really complex machine learning models. And I guess the range, there's a lot of graduation in here that we, in the sense of what kind of skills they require. And that actually brings me to my next question. And I'm really curious what the other two panelists, especially Gesa and Moises, have to say about the question. How important do you think is having or aspiring towards a formal education in the tech-related fields towards becoming or being a professional Python programmer?
First of all, I think if you have the opportunity to do a computer science or any kind of engineering degree or mathematics or physics also in a good school, in a good program, I think that's super and you should go for it because I bet I mean, I haven't done it, but I like looking at the curricula of universities, I'm just like, this is all fascinating topics of study, that it's like really probably like super nice to be doing this for a few years as your main job, basically. So it's all great, and you get a lot of exposure to programming then probably, which is also super. And you learn, as Kat said, a lot of core concepts that you can then draw upon in your professional life later on. So that's all super. But I think if you didn't have that opportunity, then also you shouldn't despair, basically. It's not a completely like I've many very great colleagues who actually don't even maybe have a university degree, have done all kinds of things in high school and university, have all kinds of degrees, and are still really excellent among the excellent colleagues that I see. So I think it's not strictly required to have a formal degree in a certain discipline or a certain restricted set of disciplines, because nowadays also there are, again, at least in Germany, I see that this hadn't been the case, for example, 5 years ago, I guess so much. There are more and more companies who actually take serious the idea of you can learn on the job a lot of things. So if you're enthusiastic and interested actually into these entry-level, for example, developer positions, they would then hire you, and you then have the time to learn and prove yourself and pick up a lot of the stuff that you maybe didn't have the chance to learn while studying.
Cool. Thanks, Gesa. Moises, what is your perspective on this topic?
Yeah, about pursuing a formal education in Python or any other software engineering stuff. I think it depends a lot on where you are in your life right now. I've met a lot of people who had no solid education, like formal education in computer science, and they were like great developers. But it's not that saying that like these people were able to do this, that, okay, I don't need a formal education. Well, a formal education opens a lot of doors at first, well, in the beginning to start with. So depends a lot on where you are right now with your life. Can you, if you have the time to do it, like go for it, or depending on if you have some other high level education already, what can you do to complement that? To make a complement to that and achieve it, because there's a lot of things you can do just by knowing about if, else, for loops, and reading and writing output on the screen. But if you want to get, if you want to grow in your career, at least you need the discipline to go for some knowledge, and it just doesn't end with the formal education. You have to keep updating yourself.
Cool, thanks, Moises. So, again, I see a kind of consensus or team emerging in the sense that it's not a requirement. It's really great to have because it will open a lot of doors for you. And in any case, you have to keep learning and updating your skills no matter what. Kat, you want to say something on top of that?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree that yes, formal education opens many doors, but I also want to point out one thing again about other engineering disciplines where it is in fact quite common to expect, again from Wikipedia, your education doesn't end with your degree. It is expected that you put in 4 to 6 years of peer-reviewed professional practice and then later on passage of engineering board examinations. Let's put that other one to the side. But there is the expectations that you can't know everything after you have been formally educated. You must learn from your peers. There's some things that you just cannot learn theoretically. You need to experience, and you need to do the mistakes, have it all fall on your foot, and recover from there. And one thing Gesa mentioned, that it's actually it's a responsibility of the companies to enable you to do that, and it's a responsibility of us as senior engineers to enable juniors to do that. And we and especially the companies are doing a pretty shit job at that. Like a lot of times, so many times I've heard from junior data scientists who are the only data scientists in their team. This can't be good. This is just not fair to these people who still need guidance from senior people and learning from senior engineers to become professional themselves. And yeah, I think we can do better than that as an industry.
I find the number you quoted really fascinating. What was it, 4 to 6 years of professional guided practice?
But I mean, that is somewhat in line with after which time you call yourself a senior software engineer, isn't it?
It is actually, and I find it interesting because in my experience, even mid-level people are already expected to be quite independent in software engineering. And so I think that number makes a lot of sense, but I have never seen it quoted like that. Super interesting. Maybe to switch up gears a little bit, have you ever experienced a fellow Pythonista do something that you would have considered very unprofessional? And if so, what was that? Anyone?
Can I take a very? Can I pick a very low fruit here?
Sure, go for it.
Not writing tests. I've met people who, well, in the past they refused to write tests, but now they're like, I've met people even like in 2019, 2020, people who who either didn't like writing tests in a sense that they would rather just write the code and then ship it without testing it, or that they even like completely despise the idea of that. And that's would be to me like the typical unprofessional behavior, because it's like very easy to correct, and it's like in some sense it's objectively wrong, but yeah, there are still people who do that and who try to develop software that way.
Cool. Anybody else with an experience, or are we all always perfectly professional?
I would like to add documentation as well to the bucket. Because like caring about tests is about caring the future, the evolution of the software as well. And then when you talk about having the documentation, is about caring about the correctness of the piece of work itself. Before doing Python stuff, I was a C developer for like TLS, SSL libraries, and I had in my mind like I have the RFC document and I have the specification, and then I have to do some piece of code that gets together with this specification. And then when you don't have a specification or a documentation to say what the code does, and you just have the code to say what the code does itself, how do you know if it's like correct with all the imaginable scenarios? And then we use a test on top of that to to make sure that code and documentation are in sync together.
Cool. Yeah, that seems really important. And
yeah, which reminds me two things, if I may. One thing, like comparing software development to the other engineering disciplines, there are rarely blueprints available for the software. Like if it fails, you need to find in the software where it failed. You cannot just consult the blueprint and say, oh, that's where what should be there, but it's this instead, and we should fix that. But also, when Moses was talking about the documentation, it reminded me that there's like another quality that I've also seen many times, and it's that a particular developer learned a thing a long time ago, and they continue using that without updating their knowledge. So they've built software like it's still 1995, because that's where they finished their degree or something. And then when they are told that, okay, here's the new thing that you could use, it solves those problems that you had much better, they will also still continue using their old thing because they are familiar with that. And instead of investing their time and effort to learning something new that would solve their problem, they would continue using something that's familiar to them.
Cool. So not writing tests, not writing documentation, not keeping the knowledge up to date. Is there anything else you've seen that you would have considered, that you at the time considered very unprofessional, or at least moderately unprofessional? Gesa, perhaps?
Yeah, actually, one thing that maybe is worth mentioning in that context is that sometimes I think it's a trap when you go from hobby programmer to professional programmer. Now suddenly you get paid to then somehow not basically treat the project that you're doing at work as much a learning opportunity as you do, for example, all your exciting side projects, because like for all kinds of reasons, because you didn't choose all the technologies yourself, or there is delivery pressure, or just this fundamental psychological trick that somehow if you have to do something, it's not as exciting anymore. And then also you have to obviously collaborate usually with different other developers to build it. It's not you on your own building it. And then sometimes because I'm saying that because this is a trap into which I think I've fallen sometimes in the past, that then I get into this negative kind of mood and I don't treat my project anymore as a learning opportunity and just try to see the places that I can improve, and then like be basically doing the best job I can, and just try to also maybe see like what can I learn now, so I could suggest we do things this way, so I could learn this new technology if it makes sense in the context of the project. So I guess that's something to maybe watch out for, because I've seen myself falling into this trap. I've seen other people maybe being on the verge of falling into this trap, to basically just moan about your job and then be going like after work just doing your React tutorials or doing your side projects and just finding that much more interesting. But then if you're never like, if you should also try to be basically do your best to solve the real life challenges that you have to solve at work. And then there is delivery pressure, yes, but you can also basically turn that around and then make that something that trains you in solving real life challenges with certain limitations, because you cannot decide everything for yourself, and you cannot decide to just not solve this problem because it's just a hobby project.
Cool. So Gesa is adding not being constructive, being negative, and also not caring about real life problems and not taking them as serious. Kat, what would you add?
I would like to have the data science perspective again. I'm sorry, this will be a bit of a rant. I think collective we, as data science, the discipline, we are quite unprofessional. So for software engineers, writing tests is a best practice. It's the expected behavior of a software engineer. For data scientists, it's not. Continuous integration, forget it. I have worked with data scientists who refuse to use version control. Documentation, who cares? We'll just do the same analysis again, the next person who joins the team. I have seen unscientific practices like using a different feature engineering code for measuring your models and for production, so that whatever you measured is not what is actually in production. to some degree, that is because software engineering is an older discipline, and people have already gone through the motion of establishing these best practices. But I also think as data scientists, we kind of all know better. Many of us come from science disciplines, and that kind of unscientific behavior of non-repeatable experiments, of not properly documenting what you are doing, it would not fly in a professional lab. So why does it fly in your data science work?
Thanks, Kat. Yeah, that seems really important. And unfortunately, it also mirrors some of my experience in data science as when I still was working in data science. And it's one of the reasons why I decided to go back to software engineering, to data engineering in particular, because I find the environment more conducive to my values in terms of being professional. But it doesn't not necessarily mean that all data scientists are prone to this behavior. It's just
no. And I think, I mean, as best practices establish, people will get used to doing it like that, just as you had previously many more software engineers who wouldn't want to use tests. And now it kind of feels weird for them to refuse, doesn't it? For data scientists, it doesn't yet feel weird, but at some point it will. When we just need to, we all need to push ourselves forward, that we can do better and achieve a higher standard.
Absolutely. Let's all to do our best to improve the standards overall. And maybe to wrap up this panel, the pre-collected question part of the panel before we move into the open Q&A. What kind of practical advice would you give somebody if they don't consider themselves a professional programmer yet? What advice would you give them to build up their skills, and what's maybe one skill you would recommend them to pick up so that they can feel more comfortable in considering themselves a professional?
Okay, maybe I'll start. I think there's no way around this 4 to 6 years of peer-reviewed professional practice. Find yourself a team where you can learn from somebody else. And I understand that is hard, and sometimes as a junior, you have to take a job where that is not possible, but try to use that as a jumping board to go somewhere else where you can learn from your peers, and where your peers also can tell you which kind of theoretical fundamentals you are lacking, so that you can go back and review them and study them if you are lacking the formal education.
Cool, thanks, Kat.
I would maybe also add to that the team part is the very important one, because it will make the entire process faster and more efficient, because you can probably pick it up on your own, maybe all of it, maybe some of it, but it's going to be a much longer and much harder process than if you have a team of people who know what they're doing and they can correct your mistakes and give you feedback very quickly. So then that would shorten the process maybe 2, 4, and 6 years, because otherwise it would take longer than 4 or 6. Thanks.
Cool. So find somebody where you can learn from a good team in particular, and they have the patience to take those years to learn. Anything else you would like to add, Moises or Gesa?
Basically, I don't have much to add, because it's really funny, because the first thing that I think about when I hear the question, like, what would you recommend if someone wants to become professional, is really indeed to consider to try to get hired and work on a job on the one hand, because then you have colleagues who can inspire you, who can mentor you, give you tips, and on the other hand, because then if you see what it takes to basically get software from development to production, you have more ideas of where you want to go next, or what you want to learn next, what particularly interests you, and where you see your gaps. So that would have been also my first answer to that question.
Cool.
I had something in mind for this question earlier today, and I use it a lot, actually, this kind of approach. And so basically what I do is I take any problem that I had in my mind. It might be about like some software I'm building, some games I'm playing, some new concept. I want to process the data from my bank. I want to do like anything related that I think software could solve. I create a Python package for that. And then by creating a Python package, I can, if it gets to the point that it's good enough, I can upload it to PyPI, and then I will learn about sharing a Python package. And then building the Python package, I can do unit tests on top of it. I have to write documentation about it and put on read the docs, for example. So I lost the count already of how many Python packages I've created. I don't know how, but I think I have like less than 5 uploaded somewhere. But as I mentioned before, by the repetition of this small steps, like small exercises, tackling different features, like, okay, I cover test, I cover documentation, and then from one package to a different one, maybe you try a different testing framework, maybe you try a different documentation technique, and so on. And then you also have to deal with I missed the word right now. CI, continuous integration, yeah, and continuous development, which are also important things that everybody should practice and understand a bit about. And just to hop into a bit back in time when Kat mentioned about not using source version control at all, that makes me cringe. And like, even if I'm writing notes, my fingers are already itching to just like type git init and start committing things, because if it's saved on my computer, just in my computer, I don't trust it. It has to be somewhere on some version control.
Cool, thanks. Cool. With that, I would like to open the open discussion. So if you have a question for our panelists, either write it into the chat, or even better, unmute yourself. Maybe even turn on your camera if you're open to that, and just go ahead and ask questions.
Maybe in the meantime, to the point that Moises made about building Python packages, about stuff that you need to do, I figured last year that I'm going to write a small module to compute my taxes for a year, and I thought it's going to be like, it's going to be like 100 lines of code or something, maybe like one Jupyter notebook. And I really underestimated the complexity of the task, and like thousands of lines of code later, the project was like 90% finished, and then was after another round of tests, it was also like 90% finished. Turns out the taxes are complicated.
Yes, taxes are complicated indeed. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. Any questions?
I also found that as an interesting thing to learn about other stuff. So there's something else I want to learn about. If it's not software related, I try to create a Python package around it, so I can try to program it, so I end up understanding it better. So I try to frame other problems into software, which I understand better, to try to go around it.
Cool.
What's an example of what you try to understand by writing a package for it?
That's a great question.
Games, board games, tabletop, war games, for example.
So do you write simulators for those games, or do you implement the...
Not that fancy, just try to write the rules. Lately, I created a package, a project. There's this game called War Machine, so I created a project called War Machine Open Data. And the idea is that I'm taking all the rules of the game and put in there, and trying to learn about, with that together, I'm learning about internationalization a bit, and then I'm creating translation files. And then now I was able to find people in the Spanish community, and they already translated 96% of the rules I have in the package already. So it's something that just like grew out of the box and is reaching other people already.
Cool.
My version of this is if I want to learn something, I submit a talk. And I haven't even done the work yet. I just put a deadline on me, and then I have to do it. I have to learn it. It's maybe less for programming thing, that it's easier to learn it by programming, but more for theoretical concepts or a paper you were interested in.
Cool.
I also noticed that I only really finish side projects or bring them to an MVP state, at least if I have submitted a talk or I have to give a demo or something about them. So that's a really good trick indeed.
I once set myself, I have one project on PyPy, and I set myself a deadline. I have 1 week to do this tiny thing from start to finish. It was really just a super tiny problem that I needed solved, and that helped with the deadline. One week where I had some time beside the job that put me in a very strict position. And I had to weigh up what kind of features I could add or not. So that was a very interesting experience to put yourself into the super tight deadline.
Cool. So deadline and external pressure and external accountability apparently help you to become maybe even more professional, but definitely to learn things. Are there any last questions? If not, we can just conclude it and move on to the closing of our panel. Let's give it a few seconds. I guess not. So thanks everyone for your questions. Thanks everyone for the questions, and especially thanks to the panelists. I really appreciated your answers, and I thought it was a great discussion. So thank you very much.
Excuse me, sorry. I actually have one question. I was just
great. Busy. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm studying software development in Sweden. So I'm in the first year. So we're learning a little bit of Python, learning some basics of Java. And I just wonder, like, if I continue this program and finish it, how can I choose which language I'm going to go deeper with or work with it in the future, and how do I go about it? Thank you.
Any of the panelists have a suggestion? Maybe Moises, because you said you worked with a lot of languages.
Okay, yeah, my first job was in C. And I was already I was still in the university. So I was in my third semester when I got this internship. And then I just was an intern for the same company for 2 years and a bit until I finished my course. And then they hired me. And for 7 more years, I was working with C. So it's not about since you are very early in the career, I wouldn't say it's not about focusing on choosing like one language and I will focus on this language. I think the language comes up with the opportunities as well. So it's like you know a little bit of Python, you know a little bit of Java, and probably you will see many other languages around the whole course. And then opportunities will come, and based on that and based on your skills, you will find something, and then maybe if you have the interest to keep on that career, you will eventually learn more on the technology itself. So it's more about being open to the opportunities and knowing what job are you aiming for. If you really like a language, and then you have to see the job offers, like where am I supposed to use this language? What should I learn to use this language?
Yeah, all right. It's just that, so if, for example, if I choose Python, so should I just learn it on my own? Because my following programs courses, they don't really teach Python, right? So do you like focus on one language and go about it? Or like, do you learn when you're in the university, or do you learn actually when you start working? Or
Gesa, you look like you want to say something.
I would say like basically in the university, you basically learn about the syntax of the language and how to use the language. It's when you get more professional with it in more like convoluted projects, more complex scenarios, that you will have to dig deeper in the language to evolve your programming skills on it. But concepts, things you build on top of languages, they can be transposed to other languages. Like if, else, for loops, they work the same in Python, they work the same in C, they work the same in Java. And like functions, method, classes. So these high level concepts are one thing. Is in those concepts that you have to focus on learning, understanding tests, understanding continuous integration, understanding web development, understanding IoT development. Depends on where you want to go.
Thank you very much.
I would like to add to that, or just to stress the point that you're learning now not specific languages, you're learning how to learn languages, and you're learning how to program. And very practically, I mean, if your university has group projects in a specific language, then learn that language. Group projects are where you really can make your experiences. If you are interested in something specific that is often done in a language, like data science is also often done in Python. Computer vision stuff is often done in C++, for example. Learn that language, learn something where something is done that is very interesting to you. Maybe there is an open source project that does cool things in one of those languages, then make that your decision. It's just about getting experience in programming, and later on you can easily pick up other programming languages. That you're learning how to do this right now.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Anyone else with the last question?
I have a question. That's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I was super glad to hear Gesa saying that she has a background in the humanities, and I'm curious to know if there are any do you have any like knowledge or skills acquired during your sinology degree that you feel helped you later on after transitioning to software development?
That's a very good question. I've thought about this before. What could I pinpoint? What skills I've acquired that somehow can be transposed, or that I can transfer to programming or working as a developer. I think for one thing, because I did classical sinology, so that is basically I had to be able to read documents in Chinese written between the 17th and 19th century in classical Chinese, which is a very elliptic, quite sophisticated language, which obviously has relation to modern Chinese, but is also not quite the same. So it's more comparable to ancient Greek or Latin. And in order to learn that, you really have to be very focused, basically. So I think on the one hand, I learned to be very disciplined and very focused, because otherwise there's just no chance to decrypt this code, basically. And also certain groups of authors have certain kinds of expressing themselves, so it takes a lot of exposure to their texts until you can really fluently read them and make sense of them. So that's one thing, maybe. And I think when learning to program and learning basically concepts in software development, it's a great bonus if you can basically focus more for longer than 5 minutes. Not saying that someone who doesn't study humanities cannot do that, but I think this was a training that I got from my studies. And then I had something else, which I forgot now. Sorry, I talked for so long, not coming to the point that I know. I forgot what the second point was. Yeah, can't quite can't quite recollect what it was.
Tweet it at us if you can think about it later.
Yeah, very sorry. Completely.
Just send us a tweet with it, and then Theo we can make sure that Theo sees it.
Sorry, Theo.
No worries.
Oh, thanks again so much for all your participation in this panel, and maybe we can let's everybody give a round of applause to the panelists, because I think they did a tremendous job. And I guess we can close the meetup now and move to the informal part afterwards.
Yeah, so I guess this concludes the, we have a poll first. Let's see how the poll pans out. Wow. Thanks so much, everybody. Please stick with us for a casual chat and some fun games afterwards. And until then, a special thanks goes, first of all, to today's panelists, to Artur, Gesa, Kat, and Moises. And yeah, also thanks again to ScoutP for sponsoring today's PyBerlin edition with its Zoom account. And above all, thanks to all of you for being here, and hope to see you in a couple of minutes for some small talk and some fun. The next PyBerlin meetup next year will be on January 25th on a Monday. And as always, if you would like to co-organize PyBerlin, please reach out to us. We're always looking for new people to help out. And also, if you have an idea and would like to speak at a PyBerlin event, that would be amazing. Just use the form behind this link and send us a proposal. As always, we love it when you tweet about PyBerlin, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter if you haven't done so yet. Also, feel free to join our community Slack channel under pythonberlin slack.herokuapp.com. And thanks again.